We're here that early. But appreciate it. If I just want to ask you one thing before we start. All mobile devices, you can keep them on, but please put them in silent mode. If possible, just in all your presentations that you attend today, it's just respect for our speakers. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 8th Annual Transitions Conference. I just can't believe it that we started this 8 years ago with our Vice President for Enrollment Management, Dr. Gareth Fowles. He had this great idea of having a conference that we can impart knowledge to our colleagues out there in the area and in the space of learning challenges, learning differences, learning disabilities, whichever you choose to call it. And, we've seen this conference grow. We've seen it move on. We bring in great speakers every year to impart that knowledge to you guys, that you guys can take it and collaborate with others when you are in your workplace. And hopefully apply some of these strategies in your classrooms if you're a teacher or if you're a parent at home, and to keep advancing our students with learning challenges forward. It's very apparent that these conversations that occur over the years are of utmost importance to us in this room today. Today, and I don't see it quite yet, but we have over 450 attendees that have registered. We always have those early comers, like I said, the 6:45s, and then we always have those ones that, I'm going to sleep in and be here right on time. So we just want to welcome you. A special welcome to our international guests who visit us from Switzerland, Ecuador, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Canada, the Bahamas, and especially New York. Yeah, different crowd that, right? No, just kidding. We welcome everybody. We also welcome over 50 students today for our college experience. It's the day in the life of a college student. We've morphed this and changed this, and we work with admissions to really give the students an experience, what it is to be like on a college campus for the day. They'll be hearing from professors. They'll be hearing from a person who can help them with specific strategies in class. And today, those students who are here right now, when we finish with the keynote session, you'll see people out in the lobby that will have students this way. Please make sure you follow them and enjoy your day. You'll also be having lunch in the cafeteria. So we really make the whole experience for you a really college experience. I want to thank the people across campus who worked in making this event happen today. To my staff, thank you for your continued support and dedication. You are the true champions and make me look good. So keep doing what you're doing. And a special recognition must go out to the coordinator of the program and the speakers who are in here. Really have had contact with Peggy Peterson. Her dedication and commitment and staying late and working after hours is really appreciated to really make this go. And those of you who have run conferences and know what it goes into making a conference a success can understand her dedication to making this happen. So really appreciate it, Peggy. Thank you very much. Also, we have exhibitors. Some of you have already visited the tables outside. Please make sure you go past the exhibitors outside in the hallway outside and visit them. They have some great information that they can impart to you as well. Some of them are speakers. But to really get an idea of what's out there to support students with learning challenges. So, why do we do this? I pulled some statistics to continue our work, and I call it good work. In regards to this, this comes from the National Center for Learning Disabilities. 79% of Americans and 99% of educators agree that students learn in different ways. Wow. But then we're confined in our classrooms at K through 12 that we have to teach a specific way and follow a specific curriculum. So sometimes it takes this knowledge to help change who we are, help change how we teach in the classroom. I think that's an important message Because learning challenges or not, every student learns differently. Another statistic, only 1 in 4 students who receive special education services in high school consider themselves to have a learning disability. 25%. Another statistic, because this is transitions to higher education, right? Only 17% of young adults with learning differences receive accommodations or support in higher education, compared to 94% that do it K through 12. Now that's a large drop-off. So that's again another thing, education, guidance counselors, making sure students really push students to disclose when they get to higher education. Because of the students with learning disabilities that attend university, the graduation rate is 41%, and that's over an 8-year period. So we've got to continue to educate our students. Another increase we've seen over the past few years is mental health disorders. Of students attending universities, 41.6% say or have anxiety disorders. Of those students as well, 36.4% report some form of depression. ADHD has seen a rise over the last decade to 53% of students attending university. So we know that we do good work. We know we need to continue to do good work, and we need to also encourage educators, be the change agents we need to be in the classroom, and the advocates that we need to be for students with learning challenges. So we continue to do this. We continue to collaborate with each other. And today's luncheon is a little bit different than we've done in the past for those of you who have attended. And by the way, we have a gentleman in the audience who's attended all 8 transitions conferences. Where is he? Lou? Oh, he's not here yet. Maybe he's missing this one. But now, so during lunch, I ask that you not sit with your colleagues, but spread out. Maybe if you have a bit of separation anxiety, that's okay. Keep one colleague next to you, okay, and collaborate, because that's how we learn. A lot of people and a lot of us who work in this industry, we understand and we know the information, but when it comes from us, it falls on deaf ears. But when it comes from somebody else, people listen. And that is part of this conference today, is hopefully that they impart knowledge to us, that we can impart knowledge to other people. And after that, you do it at lunch, and you can collaborate and form something and become those agents of change. But now, it's time for me to introduce the president of Lynn University, Dr. Kevin M. Ross. Dr. Ross was named as the 5th president of this institution, taking office in July 1, 1966. No. Sorry, Kevin, I just dated you. In 2006. Sure, I'm in trouble. He first came to Lynn in 1999 as the Associate Dean of the College of International Communications. And he has previously served as a number of other positions, including the Vice President of Institutional Advancement and the Chief Operating Officer. Dr. Ross earned his degrees in English from Colgate University, his master's degree in liberal arts from St. John's College, and his doctorate in higher education leadership and policy from Peabody College at Vanderbilt University. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kevin M. Ross.
Good morning, everyone. Not bad for 1966, huh? On behalf of Lynn University, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our 2017 Transitions Conference. As you just heard, our 8th year holding this event. And I heard Sean from backstage. He mentioned that there was a gentleman who's been here for all 8 years. Is that person here? There you are. You know what? You get to come to the 9th for free. How's that? We're going to make that a rule right now. I was kind of hoping you weren't here, so I had to say if he was here, he could have got the 9th for free, but that's okay. We're going to make it work. I would like to welcome back all of our returning participants and some new guests as well. If this is your first time, we're thrilled to have you. We have an incredible roster of speakers today, and I hope you will all deeply benefit from today's presentations. So you get it, and we know that. That's why you're here, and we're thrilled because sometimes when you have conversations about this topic with people, and I'm sure none of you have ever run into this in any of your schools or with others that you deal with, and they give you that sort of strange head cock, and they look at you and say, I don't understand what you're speaking about. Well, you're all very steeped in this area, as are we, and we have been for decades. And Lynn University is a place where important conversations happen. We are honored to host open forums for discussion, like today's conference, and our students here at Lynn engage in discussions and exchange ideas on a daily basis through our innovative core curriculum called the Dialogues. They study belief and reason, and justice and civic life, and self and society, and quantitative reason, and scientific literacy, and that's just even before they get to their major. They read a lot, they write a lot, they present a lot, because that's how you get better at things, to learn where our shortcomings are and how we can shore some of those up and find those things that we're really passionate and good about. This conference really is stemmed out of our belief of hosting important conferences, because for years we've been working with students and families, decades now, and hearing their stories and saying, we've got to find a way to put everybody together so we can have these conversations. And so it's benefited, I think, those families greatly and many professionals in the area, and especially our university. Now, speaking of conversations, important ones, we had the privilege of hosting the third and final 2012 presidential debate right here on this campus, actually right here on this stage. There's two medallions set in just out of swiping distance of one another where the candidates sat, back then President Obama and Governor Romney. That's when we had presidential debates. Remember those? A while ago. We still believe that we hosted the final presidential debate, perhaps ever. We'll see if those come back. We were recently recognized as one of the most innovative schools in the country for the second year by U.S. News & World Report. Now, I don't love U.S. News & World Report rankings, but when they do say nice things about you, I'm a huge fan. So we are thrilled for 2 years to be recognized by them. We're ranked in the Southern region for our innovative approaches to curriculum, technology, faculty, students, campus life, and facilities, and we think we're in good company with some of the most progressive schools in the country, like Elon and Southern New Hampshire University, Chapman, and High Point, who are on that list with us as well. So we sent them congratulation notes that they finally got on a list with Lynn University. I know they've been trying for a long time, so we're thrilled for them. We're also a 2-time Apple Distinguished School for our willingness to work with students how they live and learn today. And here at Lynn, we have reimagined the college experience and delivered on it. 3 years ago, we introduced iPad-powered learning to our university, and we use much more than just the bright, shiny device, which, by the way, has changed 3 times since we started this program. We really use the entire Apple ecosystem. We use iTunes U and the apps and amazing assistive technologies that are baked right into these devices that let different types of learners learn the way that they want to and that's best for them. And all of our undergraduate students now have iPad Pros, serious production devices where they can be incredibly creative. And this supports our efforts to create a more affordable education by serving as a laptop replacement and eliminating the cost of a personal computer. And our faculty have created 40 multi-touch books. And we give those to the students for free in most cases, which features custom content created with Lynn students in mind. And we also know that learning is limitless. And now that we have a digital, collaborative, and really a curriculum that can be done anywhere, we've been able to unbundle it in some ways. So because learning is limitless, we've recently begun partnering with leading organizations and other educational institutions. And this includes technology boot camps as well as social entrepreneurship programs, which offer our students learning opportunities well beyond the boundaries of our campus. So just this past semester, we had 12 students working with General Assembly in San Francisco embedded in the tech world. So these limitless learning opportunities combine our liberal arts education with real-world experience and just-in-time job skills. And this provides the benefits of a Lynn education plus that much more. Our mission at Lynn is to provide the education, support, and environment that enable individual students to realize their true potential and to prepare for success in the world. And we hone in on that word potential, and it includes all students and all learning styles. We have been committed to assisting students with learning differences for more than 25 years, long before there were labels, long before it was diagnostic, just because we believe in the power of each individual. And we are very proud to be the home of the nationally recognized Institute for Achievement and Learning, which works with students to understand their learning competencies and develop academically during their time here at Lynn. I would like to add my thanks to Sean Eckstein and the entire Institute staff for what they do for our students each and every day and for their dedication to this conference this year. So let's hear it for them. It is now my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, author, speaker, and workshop instructor, Ruth Herman Wells. Ruth is the director and founder of the Youth Change Professional Development Workshop, which has been among the nation's leaders for more than 25 years in providing practical, ready-to-use strategies to help secondary students with learning challenges to achieve success in school life and community. She is the author of dozens of books, videos, and articles on helping challenged students succeed, as well as featured columnist for Scene magazine. And additionally, she is an adjunct professor at 2 universities. And you may have seen her unusual classroom management posters in the media, on TV shows, or in one of my kids' favorite movies, the 2 Diary of a Wimpy Kids films. Please join me in welcoming Ruth Herman Wells, and have a great conference.
Thanks, Grandpa. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today, and I want to just tell you it's really wonderful to be part of such an important conference. This keynote is called Doing the Impossible, just takes a little bit longer. And of course, that impossible part refers to how you can feel on that long drive home on the end of the day when the miracles don't come easy. And of course, at this point, I'm talking mostly to the professionals in the group, but I know there's a lot of parents out there, and I'm not going to lose sight of you as I talk. So during our time together, we're going to take a look at your job as a teacher, as a special educator, tutor, advisor, psychologist, counselor, parent, or coach working to help young people with challenges and differences succeed academically, socially, and emotionally. But as someone who crisscrosses North America, teaching professionals and others how to work with young people facing challenges, I'm also going to use some of our time today to show you some really innovative, dramatically different ways of assisting your students to their best possible futures. So I want to start with a quiz. Who said this? Everybody ready? Here comes a very short phrase. Shout out at me if you recognize it. Here's the quote. There's no one model of education that fits all students. Anybody know who said that? Shout loud, because there's a lot of you and I'm not going to be able to readily hear you. Anybody recognize that? Where's Sean? Is Sean still in the room? That was a quote from Sean, the director of the program behind this. And it's on the website, by the way. And, you know, I've been saying it for 30 years, and apparently Sean's been saying it for at least a good portion of that time as well. And while I think it's a great quote, I want to give you the quote now from the perspective of a student. A student had some pretty severe challenges. Since this conference is all about students and challenges, I want to make sure that what I do is, whenever possible, channel those students' viewpoint to you so that you can see the world through their eyes. And she was a girl at the time. She's now a woman, but at any rate, at the time she wrote this, she was a teenager. Her name was Samantha Abil, and she says that, and this is Sean's quote from her perspective, that kids with learning differences are like trees in the moonlight. They cast a shadow and reflect light. They have gifts that let them shine, yet they also have disabilities, shadows that obscure the light. She goes on to say, they tell us from the moment we're born, there's no one else in the world like us. Then they try to teach us all the same. It makes no sense. That might be a reaction that a lot of you can relate to. Whoa. I don't know what that was. Oh, it was an earring. Interesting. I've had many meltdowns as a presenter. That's a new one. Well, it's actually a teaching device, though. So if you come, I've got it. Don't worry about it. We'll find it later. It's funny because I'm actually going to reference them later. I'm such a devoted instructor that even my jewelry is there for a purpose. And even though one of the earrings is now missing, I'm still going to work it in as a learning device. So what I'm here to talk to you today about is not my earrings, although I am thinking about where it is. I'm here today to talk to you about how you can make your schools fit students rather than expect your students to fit the school. I'm going to particularly focus on high schools gearing up to help challenge kids make a successful start in college, because my understanding is the majority of you here are from the high school level. Is that a correct assumption? Can you kind of holler at me if you work at a high school? You can applaud, that's good too. All right, but I understand I've got some university folks here as well. You want to applaud for yourselves? Go Lynn University, or whichever university you're with. And so I won't lose sight of you either, but I'm going to really be playing to those of you that are at the high school level. So what I want you to do now, and I'm going to be particularly talking to the professionals. I'm never going to lose sight of the parents that took a day off from work or managed to get in here on a weekday and to give their time. But I really want at this moment to talk, particularly to the professionals. I want you to think back to the start of your career. When you began your work guiding and helping students. I want you to think about how the world looked. It looked pretty different, didn't it? Gangs meant West Side Story, and guns were water pistols. That's not what gangs mean now, and it's certainly not what guns mean now, as you're painfully aware given the recent tragedy at one of your local airports. But let's go back in time. Let's stay there for a bit. I want to go way back in time. I want to go back to the start of the last century, the year 1900. Does anybody in the group, and again, if you're going to talk to me, you're going to have to really shout out at me so I can hear you. In the year 1900, what percentage of kids do you think came into school? What percentage of K-12 kids were in school at the start of the last century? Anybody have a wild guess? How much? Were they 100? No. Very good. Lady down front, I think. You're down front. I can't quite see you guys. All I see is lights, but hopefully you're relatively down front. Start of the century, about 6%, so you really got it quite accurately. By mid-century, year 1948, what percent of kids were coming into school? Pretty close, 33. Now, at the end of the century, this number that we're going to look at hasn't changed much into our new century. So as the century folded, as the 90s closed out, anybody got a guess at what percent of kids, K-12 kids, were in school? A little louder? It's actually a little higher than that. It's about 75, and it's gone up slightly to about 80. So somewhere in that 75%, 80% area at the close of the century. So if you look at the start of the century versus the close of the century, we weren't pulling in a whole lot of different kids. We weren't necessarily getting a very big cross-sections of kids. But by the time the century folded, we were doing a much better job at pulling kids in. We were getting urban kids. We were getting rural kids. We were getting suburban kids. We were getting African-American kids. We were getting Latino kids. We were getting gifted kids. We were getting challenged kids. If there was a kid out there by the close of the century, there was a decent chance we were getting that kid in, and we had a nice broad cross-section of K-12 kids coming in. So can you guys see how the kids have changed across that century? Can everybody see that? Can I kind of make a little joke with you? So the kid has kind of gone from Beaver Cleaver, and this is not meant mean, this is kind of just meant to be silly. The kid has gone from Beaver Cleaver to Beavis and Butthead. Would you kind of let me have that a little bit? Or you can put South Park's kids in there, or Bart Simpson, whoever you would like. But it's just a little way to capture for you how dramatically kids have changed from the start of the century to the end of the century. Now, can you tell me that your schools, your K-12 schools, have kept up with the changes in the kids? That's going to be a yes or a no. Has the schools kept up? Not even close. Not even close. So your kids have changed dramatically, but our schools kind of look like they've always looked. And that's how we end up being here today. We've gone from a narrow group of students over the century to a broad cross-section. And kids have changed. Schools are kind of the way they've always been. Now, some of you in this audience are old enough to remember a magical time and a magical place a long time ago when every mom and dad, or most moms and dads, thoroughly prepared their offspring to be successful students. It was a long time ago, probably before some of you were born, but moms and dads very, very reliably taught their offspring what to wear to school. They taught them what manners to have, what to bring to school, how to interact politely with the teacher, when to study, when to attend, why school was important, compliance, all that kind of good stuff. And certainly there's lots of moms and dads doing that today. But would you agree with me that there's a fair number of moms and dads that cannot or will not do that? Yes or no? Yeah. And so in essence, we have some kids that are coming in well prepared by their folks to fit into the school and do well, and then others, they're going to struggle. And then, of course, we haven't even started talking about kids with learning differences yet. I'll get to kids with learning differences. Right now, I'm just talking about any kid at all. So if we were to start talking about any kid, you can see that even though there's this academic curriculum that's carefully laid out and carefully spelled out for K-12 of what kids are going to learn when, did you ever realize that there's no comparable, what I call school skill curriculum to train that kid to take advantage of that, all those great academics? So even though lots of, especially elementary teachers and lots of parents, do teach how do you walk down the aisle, how do you raise your hand, how do you sit in your chair, where do your eyes go, where do your ears go, how do you talk one at a time, even though lots of, especially elementary teachers, are teaching those what I call basic school skills, we get lots of kids that, whether they have learning challenges or not, coming in kind of expected to know that kind of stuff. So here comes my question for you. I want you to think, if you're a professional or you're a parent, or if you're a student, just think of yourself or one of your peers. How many of you would take a student with some learning differences and let's just toss them in the water without first systematically and comprehensively training them to be a swimmer? How many of you would do that? Toss the kid in the water without first training them up on how to swim? Well, nice group, not going to do that. I know you don't have snow skiing down here, but you do know what it is though, right? All right, just checking, you're pretty far south. How many of you would take a kid with some challenges and without first systematically and comprehensively training them to be a skier, how many of you would put that kid up on the expert ski slope? Nice group, okay. Here comes the third question, and this one's going to be particularly for the parents and the professionals, and I want you to be honest, and I am going to nag and hark at you a bit if you're not. And the way you can respond is either verbally or by raising your hands, but I do want you to be honest, especially if you're a parent, or if you're a parent and a professional, I'm particularly looking at you. So the third question I'm going to ask you is a lot like the first two. It's way long, and when I start turning red and gasping for air, that's your signal to start answering it. So how many of you have ever been involved in sending a young person back to school without first systematically and comprehensively training that kid to be a student, which includes how to get up in the morning, how to arrive on time, what to bring, how to ride the bus, how to walk to school, how long to stay at school, how to focus, how to deal with distractions, how to write assignments, how to be motivated, how to manage problems, how to deal with frustration, how to talk to teachers, how often to refuse assignments. I've only scratched the beginning of the surface, but how many of you have ever been involved in a young person going back to school without teaching all those school skills I just mentioned and all the ones I didn't even get to? Raise your hand if you've ever been involved in going back to school or having kids go back to school without teaching that. And so you wouldn't expect a kid to teach themselves to swim. You wouldn't expect a kid to teach themselves to ski. But we do expect students, challenged or not, to go back to school each year without necessarily having all the skills they need to be students. Kids are not born instant students. But the world, or at least parts of the world, certainly seems to think that that's the case, that the kids come out of the womb magically knowing how to deal with distractions, talk one at a time, get their assignments done, know where to write the assignments down, and so forth. So just as you might see an unprepared swimmer flounder and sink, you may find, or an untrained skier crashing and falling, what we can end up seeing in our schools is kids floundering and sinking and crashing and falling because no one has ever taken the time to systematically and comprehensively train them on the nuts and bolts of being a student. And in essence, here's what happens. We have expectations of students that we just don't teach them. Now, that's a really unfair, difficult expectation for any student. It may be particularly unfair and particularly difficult for children and teens and young adults with barriers and differences and challenges. And so right now, I want you to imagine that I'm going to say, all right, you guys, look, I want you all to speak Swedish. And if you don't speak Swedish right now, there will be consequences, and you will be staying late, and I don't know about you getting that lunch that you were getting otherwise. How many people in the room could just start speaking Swedish? Exactly. When we expect young people to magically know all the nuances and nuts and bolts of being a successful student, it's the equivalent of expecting a group outside of Sweden, I guess, to speak Swedish. It just, you can expect anything you want of these kids. But if you don't teach them first how to do it, I question whether that's a fair expectation. So to bring this home a bit, do I have anybody in the room, any teachers in the room that teach math? Anybody in the room? Do I have anybody? Just, I'm seeing one hand. A couple hands. All right, I'm barely seeing you. All right, so those of you that teach math, here comes the question. Put your hand back up if you would ever expect proficiency in a math skill, say long division, say calculus, before you or anyone taught it to the kid. Put your hand back up. And no hands are going back up. Anybody teach reading? Okay, good. I can see people a little closer to me. All right, so this question is for anybody that teaches reading as part of your job. Would you ever put your hand back up if you would ever, well, let me ask you the question first, ma'am, but I appreciate your compliance skills. Obviously, that's a strength for you. Here comes, actually, I was going to ask you to come down and give the keynote if you raised your hand, so, no. All right, so here, wait for the question. Raise your hand if, as a reading teacher, you would ever expect proficiency in a reading skill before you or anyone taught it to the kid. And not even that lady down front, not even her hand is going up. We would never in a million years expect kids to have proficiency in an academic area until we taught them. But somehow we expect proficiency in those underlying school skills that are needed to take advantage of the academic curriculum and to do the reading and the math and everything else. It didn't take a rocket scientist to come up with this. To me, it just seems pretty obvious. And so even though teachers that wouldn't expect math skills before it was taught or reading skills before it was taught, a lot of you expect those school skills, though, don't you? Raise your hand if you ever expect students to show up on time, to sit in a chair rather than under it or be wandering around. If you expect them to know how to get to class on time, to stay in class the whole time, how to talk to the teacher. Raise your hand if you ever expect school skills from kids. Every hand should go up. If you're a professional, I should see your hands going up. And so in essence, what is happening is the acknowledgement that the way our schools are run right now is we expect school skill proficiency without ever having taught it. And I think that's difficult for any student, particularly difficult for kids with challenges. And so let me just give you an example from my personal life. So my son didn't have any diagnosed kinds of challenges, although my husband did tend to ask about once a week if I was positive that he didn't have ADHD. I can diagnose, but no, I was sort of sure he didn't. But that gives you an idea that my son was rather active when he started kindergarten. And I did remember, to teach him how to talk to the teacher and walk down the aisle and not touch everything, and where to write down his homework assignment, and how often to tell the teacher no, and how often to be wandering around during class. Remembered all that stuff, but I remembered thinking, vehicle riding. This kid has been a great car rider. I mean, he's ridden to Canada, he's ridden down to California. I'm from Oregon, so that's not as far as it sounds. Kid really had vehicle riding nailed down. He gets on the school bus first day of school, and he sees all those big first, second, and third graders, and they got their arms and their legs out the window, and they're harassing each other and tormenting the driver. And my son thinks to himself, I've been doing this vehicle riding stuff wrong all these years. And he's got his arms and his legs out the window, tormenting the driver. And poor mom, ends up spending more time in the principal's office as a parent than she'd ever spent as a professional. So what we did with my kid, and I had done this for years with other people's kids, it was a little strange to do it with my own kid, but we did it anyways, is we got the chairs out and we lined them up like they were a school bus, and we got the fake steering wheel, and we drilled my kid on how to behave on the school bus and what you do and what you don't. And that first year he got the maximum allowed 3 demerits before he got, could have gotten kicked off the bus after that, but he didn't. And then never got another demerit after that. Now this example's about school buses because it's a nice visual example, but I could have picked any area of school skills and I could have made the same case, that when kids are not trained to succeed in a given area, then they run the risk of struggling. And so the good news is that if we were turning our attention away from testing and other kinds of things that tend to dominate K-12 a whole bunch, we could really help avoid a lot of the failure experiences that these kids are dealing with. But your kids that you're dealing with, that we're here to focus on, do face challenges. And the school can be pretty mysterious and pretty unfathomable depending on the kind of challenge. Now, I noticed when I read about Lynn University that I think 1/4 of your students are from outside the US. Do I have that correct? Anybody want to correct me on that? Okay, we're going to run with that number since I don't hear anybody correcting me. So in my town, we had a young man who was a Russian old believer, and in his culture, he was a new immigrant. In his culture, it was customary to stand when you interacted with the teachers. You can only imagine how culturally sensitive, let's say, the other students weren't when he did that. And if you look at it from that youngster's perspective, not only was he having to kind of ferret out how the culture works and how the school works, he's having to do it all on his own, because nobody is teaching him the nuances. And it doesn't have to be a child from a different culture. It can be any kind of challenge or difference. So, and again, we end up with this carefully planned academic curriculum, no comparable school skill curriculum. So I have a name for this phenomena. I call it a random non-system of non-instruction. And that's why you see so many gaps, omissions, and delays in kids' training to be students. And that's why you can be at the high school level and kids still don't seem to know how to raise their hand or to be able to maintain focus or to listen quietly or to talk a proper number of times. The kid isn't a swimmer because they haven't been taught to swim. It's really not anything very hard to fathom or hard to figure out. And, I do need at this point to acknowledge that, of course, a great number of elementary teachers and certainly many parents do teach a lot of this, but there's no plan. Can you imagine if we just left it to teachers and parents to figure out when they're going to teach math? So some teachers will say, well, I'm going to start on that counting stuff in 5th grade. And others like, no, that's kindergarten. So if we left academics to this kind of, chance program, it would be kind of a mess. And that's what you see when we leave school skills to chance. It ends up being not what it could be. And it really takes a toll it takes a toll on every kid. But it takes the toll most perhaps on children that are already dealing with other kinds of problems and differences and barriers. I had a woman I was in a class, in a group like this, come up to me after I taught, and she said, she had been a challenged student, and she said she thought it was in the 1st grade, and the teacher had said to her rather urgently, come on down front, come on down front. And she said the request seemed so urgent that she just climbed on every empty desk to get to the front of the classroom as quickly as she could. And as you can imagine, that didn't go over super well. Until we teach kids those nuances, they're just going to guess. And sometimes it's going to lead to failures, and you're talking about failures that didn't need to happen. And I think that's an important responsibility we have to eliminate what I consider a double whammy, that you come into the school with your original challenge or your original difference, but then you arrive there and you've got to figure out all those nuances and all those subtleties. And to me, that's a double whammy. That's not necessary if we were focused on being sensitized to differences and alert to differences and to using common sense approaches. So what I want to do now is just give you a quick glimpse into what it might feel like to be this youngster. And I'm not going to so much teach to your brain as I'm going to teach to your gut. And once I get done doing that, I'm going to show you some strategies on the screen. I'm not going to do demonstrations because I'm too little. For those of you in the back of the room, I know that I'm just a little dot down front that you can barely see. So I'm going to rely real heavily on the projector today. But I want you to hear me saying that, as we talked about, there's no one right way to educate students. And so my reliance today on just words and the projector is not a good example. I would really like you to use a much broader spectrum of approaches, but you probably won't have the size of group that I have to deal with today. But let's take a look at what it can feel like. And so one of the things you've probably noticed is that you can see kids that just don't seem to care about school, that don't seem to have much motivation whatsoever. And especially if you're a parent, it can seem like an uphill battle to light a fire under your youngster. And motivation is so amazingly important. And by the way, I will be at 11:15 giving you in breakout session for those of you that come into that, an hour and a quarter of strategies on motivation. But I am going to throw a few in here right now. And you probably, for the professionals in the room, raise your hand if you ever took a course in college that was like Motivation 101 or How to Motivate Your Most Unmotivated Student. Raise your hand for me if you ever took a course like that. Couple of you, but not very many, and that's pretty typical. That's pretty typical. How many of you would have loved to have taken a course in Advanced Motivating Unmotivated Students 101? Absolutely. So that's where we're headed. And by the way, motivation may be the most singularly important aspect because it colors everything. It really changes everything for the student. And let me just sort of convey that this way. So as I mentioned, I'm from the West Coast today. And I think it's about, 3 o'clock, my time zone. And so I am really burned out on talking about kids and students and things like that. So if you guys don't mind, I am such a mess. Can we just change to my other area of expertise? I'm really, really good about talking about funeral insurance. How many people in the room are going to stay with me as I switch to funeral insurance? Okay, it's going to be pretty lonely and empty in here. Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I got one gentleman who's going to stay with me. Your kids do not necessarily have the opportunity to get up and walk out like all of you were getting ready to do. They are, especially at the K-12 level, they got to stay in the room. If I had managed somehow to convey to you the gravity and the importance and the urgency of funeral insurance, raise your hand if you might have stayed in the room with me. Little bit better. That's what we need to do with school. We need to sell and market school, sadly, I acknowledge that, like it was a pair of jeans or an iPad. And is it sort of tragic and sad to have to sell the value of education and the value of school? Of course it is. But I always say if you can get that kid more hooked and more interested in showing up more regularly and paying attention more consistently, maybe you will get this kid hooked on Hemingway. Maybe you will get them to see some beauty in, history or in science or whatever you teach. But initially, we have to make the motivation, we have to hang the motivation on something the kid already cares about. So in a few minutes, I'm going to be showing you slides. I'm going to put a few in on motivation that are good examples that you can see of my really unorthodox, innovative approaches to light a fire under a kid that hasn't had a fire under them for a long time or maybe ever. And again, if I get you at the breakout, then I'll do an hour and a quarter of additional strategies. The other issue that I wanted to talk about that I think is really critical with, is that these kids can feel really stigmatized. If they're in a, what term do you use in your part of the country for your special ed classrooms? Do you have some kind of typical title you give? Like learning center, do you have anything like that you use? You call it what? Exceptional, is that what the name of the class would be? And that can, not putting down any of the titles whatsoever, but just being in that class or that group can feel real stigmatizing to a kid, not that you're doing anything wrong. And so I want to just, this is as close as I'm going to get to a demonstration today. I want to give you one really cool strategy for that, and then we'll go to the projector for a bit, and then I'll wind up the last 20 minutes or so talking about pulling together everything I've given you. So for kids that feel stigmatized, I think it's important to get over that. Nobody really wants to go somewhere where they feel like they don't fit in, or that they're looked down on, or that they're different in a bad way. And so to address that issue is always a good thing. And so let me just give you one really fun strategy. I was actually going to do this as a demonstration, but I think I'm going to just describe it. So I like this done best if you have both your exceptional ed kids and other kids together, but you can also do it with just your exceptional ed kids if that's who you have to work with. And so what you're going to need are some props. And the first prop you're going to need is a cracker. And you're going to give each kid a couple crackers and ask them to eat them. And once they've eaten them, you're going to ask them to whistle. What do you think happens? Yeah, exactly. There's crackers spewed everywhere, and nobody can whistle, and kids are really getting silly and goofy. And you can say, looks like you might be exceptional ed. You might need exceptional ed for whistling after eating crackers. Or you could use whatever term feels comfortable to you. I'm just using the term that you guys supplied me today. The next one you could do is a needle and thread. And most kids are not going to get that thread to go through the needle. My gosh, you could use an exceptional ed class to help you with that. And the third one, if you want, is to have the kids sing that song, Feelings. Remember that one? Everybody remember that song, Feelings? Well, pick any really annoying, difficult to sing song, and it will work just the same. National Anthem works pretty well. And then you can talk with the kids about, hey, everybody's got something that they could use exceptional ed for or special ed for. For some of us, it's areas outside of school, like riding a bike or working our iPhone. For others of us, it's areas that are in school, but we're all exceptional ed in something, or we're all special ed in something, or whatever phrase you would like to use. What a wonderful equalizer. And that language can just ripple through your school or agency. And it's a neat example of how you use any modality to reach your youngsters, that there is no one way to educate. And so what I want to start doing now is showing you some really innovative strategies. And again, I'm going to give you kind of a potpourri. They're going to, if you're wishing I was hitting on ADHD and motivation more, come to my breakouts, but I don't want to duplicate anything, so I'm going to go pretty light on those here. And as you can see, if you want to get more of these strategies, you might want to pop over to our website. Those of you that come to my breakout, you'll get a workbook full of strategies, but those of you that are not coming, we want to do a good job for you too. So we have a free internet magazine that you can sign up for, and free sample strategies. So if you go to that link that's there, and I'll also show it again at the end, so if you didn't get it down and you wanted to, because I really want to leave you with practical, ready-to-use items and not just words that were said and then that was it. I want you to end up with something more practical. So let me do a few strategies on motivation, and I've got about 15 minutes of strategies, so I'm going to whip through these a little bit, and we'll see how it goes. You be the judge of whether the strategy is safe, whether it's appropriate, whether it fits your school rules, your policies, your personality. Please feel free to alter it. They are not meant to be used necessarily in the way that they're shown. And if you want more of them, go on the website and play. There's literally thousands more of them on the website. You can really become a walking encyclopedia of the best strategies out there, so your students will never have to come in and be untrained and unprepared. They'll always be the most trained and the most prepared students. All right, here we go. Official notice. All jobs now require a diploma. What reaction might your high school students, for example, give to that? That's not fair. Why did nobody tell me this? And they'll just go on and on and on. You let them rant and rave, and then you call their attention to the bottom. Think this poster is scary? Try life without a diploma. This one is very cool because it's got that moment of shock. Very hard to resist that moment of shock. So this is ideal for your oppositional and resistant students. And so many of my interventions are crafted in ways that are going to work around the resistance, the negativity, the unhappiness, the emotional problems, whatever this youngster has going on. A lot of these interventions are designed to still help that youngster nonetheless. This one's pretty cool. Here's your lottery ticket. And the more you learn, the more you earn. Every diploma doubles your income. And that's a fact you might want to memorize, that every degree you get doubles your income. Don't you think if we were teaching that to our kindergartners and our first graders and our second graders and all the way up through the grades, by the time the youngster hit the university or the high school, you'd really have been dealing with a completely different youngster. Yes, I am hooking education, the value of it, onto money. And I know that's not ideal, but it is a decent starting place. And it does, this intervention here does beautifully use humor. You'll see me using humor a lot because it's hard to resist. You're also going to see me doing something pretty surprising. I'm going to use confusion as an intervention. Now, obviously, you pick carefully which youngster you use confusion with. You don't want to use it with every kid, and I have to say that real clearly. But for the youngster that would work with, this next intervention is very funny. 110% of math students doubt they'll ever need math. Exactly. And in that moment that you laugh, I might have gotten a little bit of insight into your head. And for a youngster that didn't understand it because they hadn't been perhaps coming to math class, that may spur them to pay a little bit more attention to math class or to ask for an explanation. This next one is very cool. Do you ever wonder how much you earn per second, per minute, per hour of being in school? There it is. And by the way, if you want to see these items without them changing so quickly, go to the website and you can just look. The attributions are on the side. And the neat thing is if you go to our website and you click on the current blog, this is provided to you as a free printable poster. So you can have this up on the wall of your classroom, or you can be using this as a handout with your students. And so again, if you go to the website, click on our blog. This is in this month's blog. If any of you want to take pictures of the slides as I take them, that's completely okay, and you're also welcome to move down to do that. And that'll be true in the breakouts as well. If you want to take pictures, that's always completely okay. I'm a little worried how this worksheet's going to show up, so I'll read it, the key parts to you. Sooner or later, will you never need school? And I'll read one of them to you. It's the Rock News. And it says, Stars manager steals money. And so see how we're selling school to kids that are going to be rock stars and models and drug dealers and so forth. We want to make sure we don't leave anybody out of the equation. And let's see. Let me do this one. Let me skip ahead a little bit. All right, you're going to see the screen go blue for a second, so I can skip ahead a little. And unfortunately, it's not going as fast as I would like, so I'm going to head towards, do you have problems with attendance and punctuality? Yes or no? Okay, because again, I want to pick ones that are going to work for you, so let me go then to attendance and punctuality. And hopefully it's going to pop back up. All right. Here it comes. So attendance and punctuality. Get paid great to arrive late. If you've made a career out of being late, we urgently need your special skills. This is a help wanted ad. Prior experience, missing deadlines required, and of course, online applications not accepted. And again, while the kid is smiling or giggling or chuckling, you actually got insight into that youngster that a conventional method wouldn't have been able to do very well. Is there school today? This is a worksheet, and this is my favorite one. It shows your school calendar, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday's, well, I got the audience doing the lines for me. Friday's not a real school day. And again, this is a really critical area to teach. You're going to see the screen go blue so I can skip around. All right, I apologize for the blue screen. But attendance is another really critical area to teach, because if you don't have that student there, you can't work your miracle on that student that day. And so it's really, really important to make sure that you're covering attendance, and generally from the first day. Teaching skills and confidence, really important. I love this one. It says special ed, or you could change it to exceptional ed, because everyone's not the same. And you want to teach the kids that that is just absolutely fine. And wouldn't the world be totally boring if we were all exactly the same? This one's kind of funny. Now, don't use this one if it's going to get you in trouble, but I have to say, you don't lose too many kids. I think we have a hit. It says, don't follow the herd. Go your own way. You're people, not cattle. And it's really important to get the kids to understand that differences are not only acceptable, they're really important. This one's really kind of profound. There'll be people who don't believe in you. Don't be one of them. You could really get a kid. It's a punch to the stomach for some kids, and a good punch to the stomach. This next one, another real powerhouse. Some of the most successful people on the planet overcame some of the biggest failures. And so, for example, I'll do a Florida example. I believe he's Florida. Help me out. No, maybe he's California, but I'll do him anyways. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for not having good ideas. And Maya Angelou, her parents divorced, she was abused, and she was mute for years. And so to show kids that not everybody is a star in high school or in college, and that has no necessary implications for the future, is really important. These things can really hit home with the kids. And again, you can do them in different modality than I'm doing, but please do them. I really love this one. Have any of you ever read Glamour magazine? Yes? Well, this is Clamor magazine, and you clamor for a career. This one's particularly geared for girls, and it has, for example, be the boss of your wardrobe. Calculators men can't resist. You're the boss of how cute you are. And of course, this is a very silly way to get girls to consider that maybe, just possibly, there's a more important or equally important role out there for them than worrying about dating and boys and those kinds of things. Are sometimes your kids very much concerned about dating and less concerned about academics? Absolutely, and so that's a cool one. Let me see if I can do, never confuse a single defeat with a final defeat. And that's a line you can use with the kids so that they have a perspective. When they fail on a quiz or they can't learn a math equation, it can feel like the end of the world. And the more you do these proactively, the more the kids are insulated against crashing and burning when they feel that they have not done what they would have hoped that they could have done. And I want to do one more before I spend some time just sort of pulling it together. This one's really funny. I wanted to make sure that I get it in. Do you guys have any work refusers, kids that refuse their work? Do you ever get work refusers? Yes, not a lot of people will give you interventions for work refusers. I sure will. I want to hire employees who refuse to do their work. Said no boss ever. You're grinning and you're laughing. That's perfect. If you're one of my shutdown kids who does pretty much nothing, I may have just gotten your attention and I may have just engaged you. And so this is a really fun one, and I wanted to make sure that I got this one in for you. And I will put up the website information again, and I'm going to then just take a few more minutes of your time to sort of pull together what I've given you, and then we'll get you off to your breakout sessions. So what I want to do is get organized. What I'm going to do for our remaining time together is I'm going to be talking particularly to the professionals in the room. Parents, you may very much relate. And I want to talk about, I want to go back to talking about when you started your career. I want you to think back to when gangs meant West Side Story, when guns meant water pistols. And I want to spend some time taking a look at your job. And I'm hoping that I'm going to leave you feeling really much more encouraged, much more hopeful, much more positive than perhaps when you walked in the door. So I want you to get in your mindset of what it feels like it's the end of your workday and you're headed home. I want you to think about how you feel on that drive. And I want to talk to that part of you, the discouraged, kind of wiped out part of you that drives home some days, counting the days to summer vacation or retirement. You tell me. I also want to talk to that part of you that's been sad because of a young life you didn't quite salvage to the degree you wished. I also want to talk to that part of you that sometimes imagines other careers and other jobs that wouldn't so completely consume so much of your heart and your soul. Now, there's an old African saying that you've surely heard. It takes an entire village to raise a single child. With no disrespect intended to that lovely sentiment, there's a drug and alcohol counselor in a place called Moses Lake, Washington, that said she would change that sentiment. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, but you don't quite know why, because Moses Lake, Washington is about as far away as you can get from here and still stay on the continent. The reason you may recognize that name is it's believed to be the site of one of the very first school shootings in the country. And this drug and alcohol counselor says that she would change that sentiment based on all the woe that she's seen. And she would change it with no disrespect intended to say it takes an entire community so the original sentence was, it takes an entire village to raise a single child, and she would change it to, it takes an entire community to raise a single child. And if we don't do it, then the gangs and the gun runners and the drug dealers and the predators will do it for us. And that's a sentiment that can echo all the way down here, even though you're so far away from Moses Lake, Washington. Now, a couple years ago, I taught at a Northwest university, and I got to keep the group the whole week. And towards the end of the week, some of the teachers started confiding in me. And they said, I have so little say and so little input into how my school is run that sometimes just to sort of protect my kids with differences and challenges and to do a good job for them, I break the rules and I break the policies. And that really troubled me. While I really appreciated their altruism and their dedication, it really bothered me because as a mental health counselor, I'm painfully aware that when you break rules and you break policies, you are inevitably deepening the problems and deepening the dysfunction in the system. And so it was really, a kind of a tough thing to deal with. One of the teachers there said that she was so discouraged and she was so fatalistic about fine-tuning schools to serve students with differences that she felt that rearranging the education system in Washington State would be a lot like rearranging the participants in a graveyard. And she was actually more optimistic about the graveyard than she was about the education system. And again, down here in your state, that's possibly a reaction that you can relate to. During this keynote, you heard some strategies that offer you alternative courses of action that no matter how well-intentioned are going to deepen the struggles and deepen the problems in your school or your university. As you go to the workshops and classes you're about to attend at this conference, you're going to get additional strategies that offer you additional opportunities to tackle the problems in your system without deepening the problems in your systems. The classes you're about to attend are going to help you become an effective community that can join together to maximize your effectiveness with students facing differences and challenges and barriers. You should be getting methods that don't just skim the surface, but you should also be getting methods that are geared towards the kid that's the most difficult to serve, your most resistant, your most oppositional student. You're going to be getting leading edge strategies that have the potential to break through the failings, break through the dysfunction, break through the backwardness, and ease the secrets and ease the silence and make our schools function more effectively for the kids that most need the schools to function more effectively. It is so wrong to expect kids that already come to us facing challenges, disabilities, cultural differences, ethnic differences, family problems, poverty, immigration, language barriers, abuse, mental health problems. Not only do they have to deal with that, but now on top of that, they have to teach themselves how to fit into your school. And no education system is going to work its best as long as students with differences, or any kid, is expected to fit the school instead of the school fit the kid. As we talked about at the very start of this keynote, no one model of education fits all kids. And as long as kids are expected to somehow fit into schools without step-by-step help to do so, students are going to always struggle. As we learn to cherish and celebrate the differences among our students, we must learn to come together to find the newest and most effective methods that make our classrooms, our tutoring rooms, and our counseling offices fit the challenged kids who come through the doors each day. This conference has the potential to propel you towards that goal today. Now, there was a famous maestro. He was not just known for his legendary piano playing, he was also known because he had this fiery, out-of-control temper. And he was supposed to come into a really nice venue and then come out on the stage and play on his priceless grand piano. And right about the moment the maestro was expected to emerge, a little boy toddled out, a little 3 or 4 or 5-year-old boy. And he made a beeline for the maestro's grand piano. And he kind of hoisted himself up on the bench and began banging and crashing and clanging on the keys of the man's priceless grand piano. You can imagine the hush that must have whipped across the crowd, because the man's not just known for the piano playing, but this absolutely out-of-control temper. And sure enough, almost immediately, the maestro emerged from behind the curtain and he stalked over to where the child was seated. But instead of screaming at the child as everybody had feared, the man sat down on the bench next to the little boy, and putting his arms around the child, he began to make the most beautiful music out of the clanging and banging and crashing that the child was doing on the grand piano. That's the image I give to you to conceptualize your job. Your job is to start where your students are at and to help make beautiful music from whatever they bring to you. I hope that you don't sit back and wait for others to tackle this challenge. I hope that you consider it a challenge that is personal and a challenge that is an obligation and a responsibility. I think our job as teachers, as counselors, as special educators, as tutors, psychologists, principals, and parents are to teach these kids to walk, and then to teach them to walk away. Centuries ago in Europe, a man named Edmund Burke said something in his time that you have to wonder if it could even be more true and more poignant in our time. He said, "A nation without a means of reform is a nation without a means of survival." The methods you'll hear at this conference are a means of reform. Whether they become a means of survival is up to all of you. I urge you not to sit back, waiting for others to lead the way. And if you're someone that says, oh, it'll work out, the future belongs to the children, I have to tell you, in all honesty, in my long career, it's been a very long time since I've believed that the future belongs to the children, given all the lost, throwaway, disrespected, struggling students I've seen in my career. A once abused, troubled child who was once one of your students, a man by the name of Terry Kellogg, says, the future does not belong to the children. Terry Kellogg says, the future belongs to the people who hold the hands of the children. And that is all of you. I urge you to take what you learn at this conference and use it to change the way we work with challenged students. And I urge you to think beyond the four walls of your classroom or your office and beyond the front door of your school or agency, and become the leaders that will affect change and bring new ways of teaching and counseling students with challenging. And certainly the program sponsoring this at Lynn University is a remarkable, although not common, it's a relatively rare example of what I'm talking about. It should be the norm. It should be the norm. And when I say these words that, we're desperate for leaders and pioneers, those words, even though I say them lots of places around the country, they have particular meaning here in Florida. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but are you aware that Florida is a bellwether state? Did you know that? And that means that as goes Florida, so goes the nation. That things that happen here in Florida, be they really good ideas or really bad ideas, the rest of the nation tends to copy them. So when you make changes for your students here in Florida, you make changes that can easily and quickly sometimes ripple across the country. And that puts, I think, more responsibility on all of you to make sure that innovation like the program here at Lynn is something that's commonplace and not so rare and not so unique. If you're wondering what the pace of change is, as someone who wanders North America, let me go ahead and tell you the pace of change. It is not classroom by classroom. It is not office by office. It is not school district by school district. It is not region by region. It is not state by state. It's coming so slow, it's hard to even see it moving sometimes. And if change is going to happen more than room by room, it's going to mean that we have to channel our energy away from the things that really don't benefit students towards the common sense things that do. But if you say, wait a minute, hold on. That woman from Washington State that said that rearranging her state's education system would be like rearranging the graveyard, maybe she was right. Well, if you say that back to me, I won't argue with you. You could be very correct. But I will say to you, as people who do the impossible each day from very early each morning to very late each night, you already know this. Doing the impossible just takes a little bit longer. And if you say, but wait a minute, you have no idea how many struggling, challenged, profoundly impaired students I deal with. There's so many of them. I could never help them all. And again, if you say that, I'm not going to argue with you. Chances are you're even right. But I am going to give you a story in response, and it's a very short story, and it's one that some of you may have heard. And if you've heard it, I'm good with that, because it's a story that needs to be told again and again and again until there's no more need to tell it. It's the Lauren Isley story of the starfish. It's a story of a woman walking along the shore by the ocean, perhaps here in Florida. And off in the distance, she sees a man. And what the man is doing is, you're probably aware that from time to time, the tides come in, and they'll wash in thousands upon thousands of starfish, and then the tide goes out and leaves some of the starfish behind to die. And so as the woman was walking, she could see the man off in the distance, and what he was doing was picking up starfish that had been stranded on the shore, and he was throwing them back into the water. And as she continued her walk, eventually she reached the man. And without even thinking, she just sort of blurted it out. She said to him, "There's so many of them. You'll never help them all." Without even pausing, the man bent down. And as he reached to pick up another starfish, he turned And he looked in the woman's eyes and he said, "It matters to this one." And so I say to you, you're right. You will not help every youngster that comes through the front door of your school, but to the ones you do, it matters. It matters to this one. When you consider the reality in 2017, you have to agree that the pace of change has to be faster. Let me share with you the reality of Florida in 2017 if you're like the rest of the nation. The reality of Florida in 2017, if you're like the rest of the United States, you spend 4 times more per day per prisoner than you do per day per student. The reality of Florida in the year 2017, if you're like the rest of our country, then you have 3 to 4 times more shelters for abused and abandoned dogs and cats than you do for abused and abandoned girls and young women. The reality of Florida in the year 2017, if you're like the rest of the United States, that in the very short time it's taking me to close this keynote, another one of your girls was raped, and chances are very high she was too young to even graduate elementary school. When you consider that reality, you have to agree that the pace of change needs to be faster. You know, someone once said, well, kids are 25% of our population, but they're 100% of our future. I don't agree. I think you, sitting here right now, you are 100% of our future. And I want to offer you a couple mission statements so as you go through the workshops today, you can really focus in with a laser kind of a focus on how you're going to use the things of value that you found here. So I'm going to give you some words that somebody gave to me after hearing me talk. And she said, you have to pass these words on at every stop. And so I do. These words were found on the wall of the teacher's lounge at the Will C. Wood Middle School in Sacramento, California. And the word said, our task is to provide an education and help for the kinds of kids we have. Not the kind of kids we used to have or want to have, or the kind of kid that exists in our dreams. I think sometimes the best words of wisdom are sometimes found in the most ordinary of places. So I'm going to close today with some words that may be the most concise, heartfelt, passionate call to action that I can leave you with. These are going to be the words of former newscaster Tom Brokaw. If we cannot care for our children and secure for them a future filled with promise, not despair, then all the other achievements of this society shall be diminished. There is no more important test of a nation's place in history than the condition of its children. If you leave this conference at the end of today committed to applying what you learn and committed to taking ongoing action to pass this very different other kind of test, then maybe the next sounds you'll hear won't be that of more gunshots in schoolyards. Maybe instead, as you return to your students on Monday, maybe the next sounds you'll hear will be that of more starfish returning to the water. Thank you very much. I very much appreciated being here. Thank you.